What's up, guys, and welcome to a brand new DracoCatt Demon Hunter video. Today we're going to be diving into the brand new Demon Hunter cards in the new mini set of Castle Nathria. That is Maw in order. We're going to be diving into the 3 Demon Hunter cards that came out and talking about what's good about them, what isn't, and what you want to do with them. So let's get into it. So the first card we're going to be diving into today will be Sightless Magistrate. Sightless Magistrate is a 4-mana 5/4 battle cry. Both players draw until they have 5 cards. When I first saw this card, I had to reread it a maximum of 3 times because immediately I thought that this effect was so powerful that I doubted that Hearthstone would print it. That being said, this is an incredibly aggressive card. This is a 4-mana, aggressively statted 5/4 on a body that draws potentially 4 cards for your Demon Hunter deck. That being said, this kind of card adds a redundancy to the Magnifying Glaive aggro deck that it needed, where all of a sudden not having cards becomes a little bit better because if you top deck Magistrate, then you get a full hand. So this card is even better than Magnifying Glaive in the top deck perspective. However, Magnifying Glaive can draw 6 cards. This card works in tandem with synergy of not having a lot of cards in your hand. So if you're building an aggro deck that's meant to throw cards on the board as fast as possible, having both Magnifying Glaive and Sightless Magistrate kind of add this consistency to make the aggro deck even more powerful. I think this might be one of the best aggro cards ever printed. The fact that it's aggressively statted seems a little bit unnecessary, which makes me believe that this card will be even more powerful. So in decks like the Bandit Keith aggro Demon Hunter and in just generic aggro Demon Hunter, I imagine this is going to be one of the more expensive cards in the deck, but one of the more important cards as well. I think this card is a 5 out of 5. Sightless Magistrate has to be one of the most powerful draw engines ever printed in Demon Hunter. And the fact that it gives you a minion to place on the board simultaneously just seems incredible. So I will imagine we will see a lot of this in the most aggressive form of Demon Hunter. And I would be very surprised if this card did not make the cut in the most aggressive forms of Demon Hunter in the next expansion cycle, because it seems to be jacked. The next card we're going to be looking at has one of my favorite names of all Demon Hunter cards, and that is All Fel Breaks Loose. This is a 5-mana spell that is Fel, which is summon a friendly demon that died this game. Infuse, summon 3 instead. But the infuse requires 3 demons to die. A very interesting card. So ideally, this card can pack a lot of punch, because if you're summoning Inquisitors back from the dead, that is potentially, what is it, 8 times 3? That's 24 damage face off of this card with a single hero power to add with it. But that is difficult to do. So that is what makes this evaluation much more difficult. So with this card, you can summon cheap demons to infuse it with Sigil of Summoning and Vile Call. However, you don't want to be summoning the cheap demons. With this card, in order to get value out of it, you want to be summoning the expensive demons. And that being said, summoning a single demon for 5 mana makes it a little bit more expensive Eternal Servitude, which is an old priest card, which is the problem with Big Demon Hunter. Big Demon Hunter never had the ability to resurrect a demon that died that you cheated out. But now we got that. So that's incredible. And the upside of summoning 3 is nuts. So how do we build a deck around killing 3 big minions that we want to summon again to summon all at the same time to get the maximum value out of this card? It's a very difficult question. Building this deck will be the mantra of my life for the next expansion cycle, potentially. but I imagine it's going to be one of the most difficult things to discover, which is how do we build a big Demon Hunter deck that runs All Fel Breaks Loose as its staple card and gets the value off of the infused 3 demons. But when looking at this card, we realized that just summoning a single friendly demon is also good. So perhaps this might be the best big Demon Hunter support that has ever existed in Hearthstone. We finally got our Eternal Servitude, and I wonder if this will make the deck competitive. But I will do my best to try and discover that myself, and I'm sure we will have a lot of fun playing big Demon Hunter with All Fel Breaks Loose in the interim. Last but not least, on a power level perspective, we have Prosecutor Meltronix as our first Demon Hunter legendary card from a mini set. This card has Battle Cry. Your opponent can only play their left and right most cards on their next turn, which is an extremely limiting effect. So this card is very difficult to evaluate because the game state in which you play it dictates the outcome of the game. But that being said, there are some game states where playing this card does something incredibly important, which is requiring your opponent to pass the turn with doing nothing. And in that context, Prosecutor Meltronix might be one of the most powerful cards in the game, forcing your opponent to just remove their entire turn from the game. But we can't evaluate the card just based off of that best case scenario. So let's talk about the more likely scenarios in which this card fits into a game. And that would be in Relic Demon Hunter. In Relic Demon Hunter, we commonly use Dimensions on turn 5 with a Relic Vault, reducing our first cards by 3 mana and the second of the 3 and 4 cards that we draw by 4 mana. And in that concept, if we draw Meltronix, it is very, very likely that we will win the game in a mid-game scenario, which is rare. Most of the time, Hearthstone cards do not win the game immediately in a mid-game scenario, but this card does exactly that. So if you were to draw a 0 mana Relic of Phantasms and a 0 mana Prosecutor Meltronix, and you were to possibly play both of those simultaneously after your turn 5 Dimensions turn, I would imagine it might be very difficult for the prospective opponent to react to it. And that is a very realistic context of playing this card, which means it might be incredibly good. Now, we can talk about if you play this in an aggro deck, because you could also put this in an aggro deck. And in an aggro deck, you could use it as a Lotheb, and it also might be good. So, looking at this card, it's very understandable to realize why this might be really good based off of the context of the game. And the ability of limiting your opponent's reactive tools is always good. So this card, I feel like it has to be good. My go-to rating of it would be a 5 out of 5 because you could play it in an aggro deck, you could play it in a mid-range deck, you could play it in a slower deck, and in all of these variants of Demon Hunter decks, this card is going to be so limiting to what you're allowing your opponent to do that it might just be the nail in the coffin of finishing the game, much like a Lotheb card. Or an Akani. Akani is the most comparable perspective of this card, but one thing that Prosecutor Meltronix has that Akani does not is that you do not have the ability to play around the effect after it's played. You cannot kill the Meltronix to nullify the effect like you can in Akani, which makes the effect of the card much more brutal, and that once it's played, you cannot nullify the effect that it's created on the opposing perspective. So that's why I give Prosecutor Meltronix a 5 out of 5. I think this card has to be if it's good, which I believe it will be good, it will be played in Relic Demon Hunter. And whether or not it's good in Aggro Demon Hunter is something I'm willing to wait to see. But I would guess that it might additionally be such a powerful effect that playing it in an aggressive Demon Hunter deck might also be good. In tandem, or in addition to the Relic Demon Hunter deck. And that's it.